Welcome back to video number 2 of hand sanding your clock project. Remember, we're still working with the 80 grit sandpaper because after you do the machine sanding, the very first step needs to be 80 grit. If you're not positive if the sandpaper on the sanding pad is the correct sandpaper grit, remember you can always open up one side of the sanding block, take a peek at the paper. If it's not the right paper, take this one out and put the right paper in. 80 grit is correct, so I'm all ready with my sanding block at school. Remember, if you don't have a sanding block, you can use a square piece of wood, like what you have here, and then you can take the sandpaper and just hold it onto the wood and then use that as your sanding block. What we really want to do is we want to get a really nice rounded front edge on all of the layers of the clock project. Because if you get a really nice rounded edge on the front edges, it's going to make it a lot easier to do your painting. So we'll review what we did last time. We just sanded the edge by going around like this to get rid of any of the sanding marks from the machine sanders and to get the overall shape, exactly the correct shape for what you wanted. What we're going to do today is we're going to start rounding that front edge. So when it's all done, your project should look like this all the way around the front edge. The back edge is going to stay a nice square edge, but the edge all the way up to the front needs to be a very nice rounded shape. And the way you do that is by sanding along the front edge by holding your sanding block at various angles. Remember, if you're working at home, get permission from your parents or guardians on where you should be doing your sanding so you don't damage any countertop areas and you don't damage anything with the sawdust you're going to be making. Also remember, safety glasses are required. So make sure your safety glasses are on and protecting your eyes. Now, we've already sanded along the edge at a 90-degree angle to get the shape correct. And you made sure that your name was on the bottom side, so you're looking at the front side of your project. And what you're going to do today is you're going to hold your sanding block at an angle. And then you're going to do the same kind of sanding around in a shape. And this is what's really going to take a lot of time. Even with the 80 grit sandpaper, you're only going to be able to be sanding off a little bit at a time. And I keep sanding all the way around the edge of my clock. And that's going to start changing that front edge so it's not a square edge on the front. This is going to take you quite a while to do. It would easily take you 30 minutes, maybe even an hour to do all of the sanding that you need to be working on. Now that I've sanded for about 10 minutes, if I get rid of the dust and I hold this up so you can see it close, it's not a rounded edge, it's an angled edge. This is what they call a bevel. And we don't want a bevel. And the reason why it became a bevel is because as I was sanding it, I was always holding my sanding block at the same angle. And we don't want to do that. So what you're going to do after you get a nice edge started, you're going to change the angle that you're holding your sanding block. And then you're going to sand again. Go all the way around your project. And again, this is going to take you several minutes to get done. After several more minutes, my project is starting to look a little bit rounded, but if I look carefully, I'll see some lines where the wood changes from one angle to another. These ridges mean that I am starting to do different angles, but I need to keep changing and making more various angles, anywhere from 90 degrees all the way up to almost flat. So let's keep sanding. So I'm going to sand like this a little bit. Then I'm going to change the angle a little bit more. Then I'm going to change the angle a little bit more. Then I'm going to change the angle a little bit more. And when I do that, it's going to start looking much more rounded instead of beveled. If you're using the sanding block like this, it works the same way. Almost flat is okay. Almost 90 degrees is okay. And then changing the angle in between is what's going to get a nice rounded shape. The really good way of making sure you get it nice and round is that after you've used the sanding block and you've gotten that edge just about perfect, but you still might have a few ridge lines, take your sandpaper and don't use a sanding block. Just use your fingers as the sanding block. And if you'll notice, when I do that, the sandpaper automatically kind of curves around in a rounded shape. And that's a really good way to get rid of all of those ridge lines. I'm still changing and holding it at different angles while I go around. But now it's a much nicer rounded shape all the way around my project. So you ask yourself, how well did I do at my sanding with the 80 grit? It should be very nicely round and even all the way around all of the edges with no ridges on the edge or on the front. And the backside should not be rounded over. That's why your name is facing down. At school, we've got a sample board to show you a couple things. First of all, if it's not sanded at all, you're going to see the cut lines from your bandsaw or scroll saw or from the machine sanders, and it's going to be very rough. If you didn't sand very much, it might be a little bit rounded, but when you look at it from the edge, it doesn't have very much of a curved shape on the front side. So that's not sanded enough. You want to make sure that you're sanding the front edge, not the back edge. Because remember, the side with your name is the back side. The back side should not be rounded. The back side should stay nice and square. So don't round the underside or the back side. If you sand too much, you might make a really thin edge, and it might end up making too much of your wood get sanded off. So you don't want to go overboard. Remember, you're trying to get a nice rounded front edge. If you forget to change the angle of your sanding block while you're sanding, you'll get an angled type edge, a bevel, or you'll have ridge lines, and you don't want to have an angled shape. If it's not sanded enough, remember, it's not going to have a nice edge on it. This is what you want to have, a nice smooth shape all the way around. So when you run your finger along the edge, you don't feel bumps, you don't feel lumps. It's almost like looking at the edge of a straw. nice and rounded. Good luck on all of your sanding. Remember, it's going to take you a long time to work with the 80 grit so you can have a really nice looking project like this when you're all done. For now, concentrate only on your back layer of your clock project with the 80 grit sandpaper. Have a great work day.